Demographic changes are TAM expansion events. And within these TAM expansion events lies the opportunity to build the next big company, but only if you're asking the right questions. Here are the under-asked questions that separate sharp investors who will be able to take advantage of these demographic shifts from those who are going to miss the next trillion-dollar market opportunity. I'm Monique Woodard. I'm the founding partner at Cake Ventures. At Cake, we invest in companies that exist at the knife edge of technology and demographic change. So today, I'm sharing the questions that I believe investors should be asking founders, especially if they want to build portfolios that reflect where the money and the opportunities are headed. First, what is demographic change? I've spoken a lot about demographic change before because it's the underlying thesis for Cake Ventures. But here's a quick refresh. I believe demographic changes represent changes to the internet user base. And these are things like the number of people over the age of 50 has now surpassed the number of people under the age of 15. Demographic changes like generational wealth transfer is going to put money into the hands of a lot of people who didn't have it before, into the hands of much younger people, women. Those types of changes are here to stay. Behind that, other demographic changes will come along, and we should be investing on top of those too. The questions VCs ask in the room vary from investor to investor and from category to category, but ultimately, VCs are trying to understand what is the big market opportunity that you're going after? Why are you the person to tackle this big problem that you're trying to solve with technology? And why is now the time to build in this category? There are some questions that VCs who want to invest in demographic change should add to their diligence when they're talking to founders. Which demographic changes, if any, are going to be the ones that accelerate the growth of this company? Are those demographic changes durable? How is this product naturally gated by behavior, not artificially gated by identity? How does this company reflect new centers of influence, either at the consumer level or at the enterprise buyer level? How big is the market for this company as demographic changes persist? And you should be doing some quick back of the envelope math around TAM today versus TAM expansion and how that demographic change influences TAM expansion. If you're not asking these questions as an investor, you really run the risk of investing in companies that lean more toward the artificially gated types of investments where you're kind of going by your gut feeling of whether this is a massive demographic change or not. And you're not actually doing the work to understand whether this company is like a naturally gated company, right? Or a company where there can be enough growth to create a venture scale outcome. You're kind of falling down on a couple of different fronts. First, you're falling down on the market sizing front. And second, you're falling down on the natural gating versus artificial gating front. And then ultimately, you invest in the wrong companies and you absolutely miss out on the right companies. Those companies that are going to be the breakout category defining companies of the future driven by demographic change. So here are 3 tips to help you identify a sea change worth investing in. First, DYOR, do your own research. At Cake Ventures, I do a ton of white papers and research pieces and even shorter pieces that are all about the ways that we think about demographic change and the research that we are doing to identify the biggest opportunities. Don't lean on other people's work, do your own work. Next, see it in categories where you're already investing. I'm not suggesting that everyone should all of a sudden go out and become a demographic change investor. If you invest in AI, you can still invest in AI and consider demographic change as part of your diligence process. If you invest in consumer or fintech or healthcare, demographic changes exist in all of these categories, and you can be taking advantage of it today. Finally, treat shifting populations and changes in user behavior as indicators. When you see users doing a new thing, or when you see a new population changing, those are big indicators that a massive demographic change could be underneath. So take things like population decline and the rise of IVF and fertility treatments as opportunities within the healthcare space, for instance. There are always indicators that will track back to potential investments that you could be making, and you just need a way to see them as opportunities rather than just changes that are happening in our world every single day. Good investors follow the markets, great investors see them when they're coming. Demographic changes like the generational wealth transfer, the trillion-dollar female economy, the rise of deskless work offer some of the most investable categories of our time, but only if you're asking the right questions. I talk about how demographic changes are unlocking entirely new categories of opportunity so that we can invest as if the future looks different, because it does. If identifying where the future is headed, not where it's been, is your jam, follow me here.